Peoples of the world, welcome back to the EDH Community Theater. I'm Capital G, bringing you real decks played by real people over on Spell Table and Discord. And an old friend of the channel is back, bringing us his take on Elas Il-Kor, SadisticPilgrim. I personally scooped up a copy for my beloved Regna and Krav deck. F.B.I, good to see you again, and let us see what you've come up with for this newest member of the aristocrat family. Before we do, of course, there's my socials. You can find me on Discord with that digits there. Tik Tok shenanigans, of course, as well. I'm recently taking a lot of heat for telling people how to properly pronounce Putin. So yeah, that's a thing that's just happened. All sorts of other shenanigans going on there. A server of many things, the Discord server. You'll primarily find me a chance to play some Commander there. And of course, Board Game Arena if you want to try out some modern European style board games. That's my username. Go ahead and look me up and let's play some board games. Alright, F.B.I. He's got a thing for bears. Calls himself Bear Force 1 these days. And he's had all sorts of cool bear-related names. He might actually be afraid of bears, for all I know. I have to ask him about that. That said, there's not really much in the way of questions when it comes to what Elas Il-Kor does. So coming in from Dominaria United, so this is the first commander in this series from Dominaria United, black and white. For this 2/2 Phyrexian core cleric. Has Death Touch, which is intriguing, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And what F.B.I did, he put a focus on non-token creatures. I noticed in the deck there are tons of non-token creatures and cards that pay it off, so which is why Athreos is my pack one, pick one for today's show. Because we have so many non-token creatures that matter, and being able to, bring them back, throw them back onto the board, sacrifice them again and again and again, and drain out our opponents, is vital. For those who don't know Athreos, 3 mana for this 5/4 indestructible god. It's not a creature as long as you have devotion less than 7, so that is less than 7 black and white pips combined. It's not a creature, but that's okay. We only care about the static ability of whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. So if people want our things to stay dead, they have to pay the blood price for it. Such is the idea here. So, like I said, the focus is on non-token creatures, so that's actually where I'm going to start. Usually I start with artifacts, but today we're going to start with the creatures. Because we have 33 other creatures to talk about, including the Archivist of Ogma. Of course, whenever a player searches their library, we get to gain life and draw a card, and people are searching their libraries all the time. Blood Artist, of course, Aristocrat's staple. Aristocrats have always been a very well-supported archetype in our format. Corpse Knight, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses 1 life. So, they come in, our opponents lose, they die, they'll lose, such is the plan. Cruel Celebrant. When this or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Thoughtly Voidwalker sacrifices itself, which is pretty cool. Also has Shadow, also has that ability of exiling cards that we put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's from the library, from the stack. We get to accumulate a collection of cards that we can choose from later in the game and play for ourselves. Deep Known Terramancer. Coming in from Baldur's Gate, 2 mana for 2/2 with Flash. And the Molder ability is very, very powerful. It's great. One of White's best catch-up cards ever. Whenever one of our lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tap. So if someone, cracks their fetch, flash this in, and we get to ramp as well. Dranif Magistrate. Our opponents cannot cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, really restricting what our opponents are allowed to cast. Some people get really, really salty when they see this Commander Riker clone. Yes, I'm still on the train of this is Commander Riker in card form. But there's obviously get salty. It's only a 1/3. It's pretty easy to remove. I've never really had a problem when anyone else has played this personally. And I run it in a couple of decks myself, so good card. Pretty solid here. We're keeping the You notice that the curve for the most part is actually very low, and we'll get into that later in the video. Elendra, the Dark Dusk Rose. Very powerful commander in her own right. She finds herself in the 99 here, because our other creatures are going to die, so she's going to get big. Then when she eventually dies, we get a bunch of life-linking vampire tokens. Esper Sentinel, because we love cards. Flesh Taker. Life gain and scars whenever we sacrifice another creature. And it also provides us a sack outlet also, so it pays itself off for only 2 mana, which is really sweet. Jiralf's Messenger, triple black. Always enters the battlefield tapped, but whenever this enters the battlefield, an opponent loses 2 life. So really targeting a single opponent and bringing their life total down a little bit faster. The Grand Abolisher means that people cannot interact with us on our turn. We've got Gary, the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Gary wins the games. Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia. A rare case of bringing tokens into the game, in this case a 2/2 black zombie with Decayed. But even just by attacking, it's going to sacrifice itself by the end of combat, even if it goes unblocked. So this gets us some enter the battlefield triggers, this gets us some dies triggers. Fantastic, great card. I think this one was kind of overlooked at first, but people are really starting to see its value, and it's still cheap too. Kambal. Bit of a stacksy thing. Our opponents cast a non-creature spell. They lose 2 life, we gain 2 life. Has been a workhorse ever since this card's come out. Liesa, another one of those payoffs for the fact that we're running a lot of non-token creatures. It says whenever another non-token creature we control dies, it comes back to the hand at the beginning of the next end step. And if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Very powerful stuff. Running Loris. You notice again we have a lot of cheap creatures, 1 and 2 mana creatures. So Loris being able to come down in the mid game and let us get those creatures back. The nice thing about Elas Il-Kor is if you wanted to, you could run Loris as a companion, but you have to make sure that nothing else in the deck costs more than 2 mana. But Elas Il-Kor is one of the few commanders out there that can meet the companion requirement. The companion requirement, if you're not familiar with it, is only if you build the deck with this as a companion in mind. A companion meaning it starts outside of your deck, but can be brought into the game if you have met the conditions, the deck building condition. So obviously because it's in the 99, it's not bound to the conditions, and it's a great add here. Also having lifelink is a great way to keep that life total up. Mother of Ruins. Just protect our board from targeted removal. That's what she does, and does better than almost anything. Priest of Fell Rites. For 2 mana, we got a 2/2. It's tap this, pay 3 life, and sack it to return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. You can only do this at sorcery speed, but still very good. We can later in the game unearth it. If we do, it comes back onto the battlefield with haste, but it gets exiled whenever by the end of the turn or whenever it next leaves play. So that's one thing to be careful of there. But still a fantastic card here. The Priest of Forgotten Gods. 2 mana for this 1/2. Tap to sack 2 other creatures. Any number of target players each lose 2 life and sack a creature. You add double black to your mana pool and draw a card. Fantastic stuff. I like this better with tokens personally, but still, I can definitely see why it's an excellent pick for this build. Reassembling Skeleton, just no conditions. Pay 2 mana, bring this back from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Selfless Spirit. Sack this, give your whole board indestructible to the end of turn. The Soul Warden. Creatures come onto the battlefield, we gain life. We like that. Sun Titan. Again, lots of low mana value creatures here. This takes full advantage of the fact. Suture Priest. So Elas Il-Kor is basically a Suture Priest, but one that we can run from the command zone. This we run from the 99, and it provides further benefits. Sir Conrad. Another creature dies. Creature cards put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. Or a creature card leaves your graveyard. Deal 1 damage to each opponent. So 3 ways to trigger pain for our opponents. And the fact that it can also pop mana to mill cards. Tasek Harlov. A creature dies. It causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control the trigger. It goes off an additional time. Fantastic stuff. It also says that creature tokens we control have vigilance and lifelink. Again, we're not really leading onto the token side of things here. There's some incidental synergy, but that's about it there. We're here for the Def Harmonicon, as we like to call it in our format. OG Tesa. Sack 3 white creatures, exile target creature. And whenever another black creature we control dies, create a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. Yes, there's the combo that goes with this. I think it's Darkest Night. Darkest Night is not in this particular list. The combo does exist to be able to, infinitely exile things. But even as a standalone, fantastic pick for the deck. Viserys Seer. The classic sacrifice outlet. Sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Veto. We gain life. One of our opponents loses that much life. Also being able to grant a whole board lifelink at will definitely matters. Vizkopa Guildmage. We can grant the creature lifelink, or we can have it so that whenever we gain life, each opponent loses that much life. Yawgmoth Thran Physician. Yawgmoth for the 99. It's always a surprise when this comes out. 4 mana for a 2/4, has protection from humans. But most importantly, it gives us a sack outlet, and the sack outlet also lets us reduce the power and toughness of some of our opponent's creatures. And draws cards. So sacrificing a creature to put a -1/-1 counter on a creature and draw a card just keeps the card momentum going, which in Orzhov colors is usually very difficult to do. Yawgmoth makes it so easy. Zulaport Cutthroat rounds out our creature package. Whenever another creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life, and we gain a life. Artifacts and enchantments. Just 6 artifacts to talk about. We've got the Arcane Signet, Ashnod's Altar, another sack outlet, this one giving us double colorless. Phyrexian Altar to give us a colored mana. Skull Clamp. Throw this onto one of our creatures, sacrifice it, draw some cards, such as the plan with that. And of course the Salt Ring. Our last artifact, of course, is Bolas' Citadel. Putting us on the top end of the deck. Nothing costs more than 6 mana in the deck. This makes it really easy to just churn through and spam permanents onto the board. Even when it's used fairly, like it is here, like there's no infinite combo potential. Even if it's used fairly or as fairly as possible, it is a beast of a card. Enchantments. Let's start with Agent of the Iron Throne. Now, this only ever works when, because it's a background, it only ever works when your commander is on the battlefield. But it says that commander creatures you don't have, whenever an artifact or a creature you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So it basically doubles up our commander's life drain trigger. Animate Dead is here. 2 mana, bring back any creature from any graveyard. Yes, it's a little bit smaller because it loses that 1 point of power. That's fine. It's still one of the best reanimation spells ever. Bastion of Remembrance. Unlike Agent of the Iron Throne, this is always going to be active, and it gives us a token, which is going to trigger our commander when it comes in and when it dies. Bitter Blossom. This I actually really like with Elas. Because at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and you create a fairy rogue creature token with flying. But then Elas gains you that life right back, so at no cost to you, just waiting for one of these every turn. You're getting a fairy every turn, no consequence to you at all. Black Market Connections. I saw a recent episode of Game Nights where this put in a ton of work. I haven't sat across the table from this card yet, but I can see why people love it. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you can create a treasure token and lose a life. You don't have to, but you can. You can draw a card and lose 2 life. You don't have to, but you can. You can hire a mercenary. By losing 3 life, you create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter. Emphasis on the shapeshifter. It's every creature type. With shapeshifter creature token with changeling. It specifically does have the changeling ability. So, fantastic, fantastic card. And yes, the correct way to play this is to pay 6 life every time that you can. Obviously, pay attention to what's happening on the board. You don't want to bring yourself down to like 5 life and then all of a sudden get domed by your opponents. So be careful with this card, but the power is very real here. Dance of the Dead, very similar to Animate Dead. The difference is it actually grants the creature its enchanting +1/+1, but we have to pay 2 mana on our upkeep to ensure that it's untapped. Greed. Very simple card. Pay a black mana and 2 life to draw a card. You can control when you use this. You can dump like 6 mana into this and draw 6 cards. Yes, you lose 12 life, but that's fine because you're gaining it right back. That's how this deck works. Sanguine Bond is here. Whenever you gain life, each target opponent loses that much life. Note, Exquisite Blood is not in this list. That seems to be an active choice from F.B.I. We'll talk about Exquisite Blood later in the video. Smothering Tithe. Whenever an opponent draws a card, we get our treasures, because that's very, very rare that they pay that too. And the Meat Hook Massacre. Big money card in the deck. Even if you just cast it as double black and have it sit as an enchantment, those triggers are devastating. If it's the mid to late game and you dump a bunch of mana into X and wipe the board, oh, that's rich. So, love this card. Looking forward to the day the price drops, if it ever drops. Instants and sorceries now. Of course, we're playing Orzhov. We're running some excellent targeted removal. That's what they do best. Anguished Unmaking, a great example. Any permanent that we want gone, it's gone. Deadly Dispute. You get to sacrifice an artifact or a creature to draw 2 cards and create a treasure. Despark. Exile a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. Generous Gift. Anything that we need dead is dead. Yes, they get a 3/3 elephant. We don't care. Hagra Mauling. A removal spell that can also be a land. So, if an opponent controls no basic lands, it only costs 3 mana instead of 4. Destroys target creature, or if we need the land instead, we can flip it over to the backside, put it into play tapped, and it gives us access to a black. Path to Exile, of course. Take any opponent's creatures out of the game. Yes, they get a basic land from the deal. Totally fine with us. Return to Dust. Shoot down up to 2 artifacts and/or enchantments if we cast this during our main phase. Swords, of course. Exile a creature. They gain the life for it. Teferi's Protection. Blink off the board if we need to get out of the way of something. And Village Rites. For 1 black, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. Very simple stuff, very effective stuff. Sorceries. Descent from Avernus. I'm a huge fan of this pick. Triple white X. Because the mana value is so low, an X of 2 or an X of 3 can bring several creatures back from our graveyard. It says here, return all creature and planeswalker cards with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, fantastic mass recursion. Again, as little as 5 or 6 mana will get us a ton of value. Damn! Fantastic card. If you want one thing, if you need to get one thing, you pay double black. If you need to get all of the things, you pay double white and 2. Reanimate, the very best reanimation spell in the game. For 1 black, whatever you want back is yours. Any graveyard. Yes, you lose life for it. It's a very, very small price for what you're getting. Toxic Deluge, best board wipe in the game for 3 mana, and however much life you need to spare, just wipe the board. Gets around Indestructible, gets around all of the things. Victimize rounds out our sorcery package. If we've got at least 2 creature cards on our graveyard, and we've got something on our battlefield, pay the 3 mana, sack the thing on the battlefield, get the other 2 creatures back from the yard into play. 1 Planeswalker, by the way, just the 1. It's Liliana Dreadhorde General. Excellent pick. If you're going to have only 1 Planeswalker, this is the one. One of the very best in our format anyways. For 6 mana, creature we control dies, we draw a card. It spits out zombies for us. It forces everyone to sacrifice 2 creatures if you use the minus ability. -9, I don't see this deck getting to, but it can. Actually, we've got Yawgmoth. He proliferates. This can very easily get to the -9 now that I think about it. So there we go. Excellent pick there. Lands. Now, I keep emphasizing the fact that the deck has a lot of low value creatures, what have you. In addition to the 1 MDFC that we've seen so far, there are 33 lands, so a total of only 34 lands in the deck. And only 2 mana rocks, so only 36 total mana sources. Which is a little on the lower side, but we're focusing more on cheap, efficient fuel rather than ramping out to big spells. So I can see it here, although I personally like running more lands, but the ones that we do have here, things like Bushuka Bog are excellent. Cabal Coffers, which means Urborg, is in here. there it is. The command tower, concealed courtyard, exotic orchard, fabled passage, Fetatif, the godless shrine. This is the spacey one from Infinity. Goldmire Bridge. I personally like the artifact lands. There's not a lot of artifact land synergy in the deck. There's a couple of pieces that do work with it though, so I thought that was cool to see this year. Not a lot of people run the artifact lands, at least in the games that I've played. Isolated Chapel, Marsh Flats. Go for any plains or swamp. The Path of Ancestry. You've actually got quite a few clerics in the deck, and keep in mind, that I'm going to be talking about the accidental cleric synergy that we have in the deck in just a moment or two when I get to the spice section, as I like to call it. 8 plains, Prismatic Vista, Scoured Barrens. This drops in and gains us a life. Shattered Sanctum, the Shine Shadow Snarl, and 8 swamps. That brings us to a total of 33 lands. 34 if we include the MDFC. And F.B.I, thank you for the list. Pretty sweet stuff here. Of course, I am also a huge fan of Orzhov Aristocrats. I personally run Regna and Krav, so I do know a few tricks here, and I'm going to share some of the ones that I'm aware of. I mentioned in the video we did not have Exquisite Blood in the deck. We don't need it, but if you happen to have one, probably should. Ends games a lot faster. Obviously, if you're trying to keep a moderate power level, you don't necessarily toss it in, but maybe keep it off to the side if you want to level up the deck later on. Cards I do definitely recommend. A couple of creatures. Cliffhaven Vampire. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. And in a similar vein, the Marauding Blight Priest. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. We have so much incidental life gain that having cards like this to weaponize them do speed up the game a little bit in our favor without necessarily being like unfair or overpowered. So I definitely wanted to highlight those. A newer card I wanted to highlight, the Cult Conscript. We've already got Reassembling Skeletons. This is similar. For 1 mana, it's a 2/1. It enters the battlefield tapped. For 2 mana, we can bring this back from our graveyard to the battlefield, but we can only do this if a non-skeleton creature died under our control this turn, which, I mean, that's what our deck does. So, this is a newer uncommon from Dominaria United that might slot in very nicely. A rare that slots in very nicely, and I've mentioned that we've got quite a few clerics in the deck. Shadowrite Priest. Even our commander is a cleric, by the way. This is one I didn't quite notice myself when I was doing my Dominaria overview. 2 mana for a 2/2. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. And it says 5 tap, sacrifice another cleric. You could sacrifice a commander if you wanted to. Search your library for a black creature card. Put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. And we've just gone through our creatures. You can get Sir Conrad. You can get Loris. There's so many excellent targets for this. So I think this would be an excellent add to a deck of this nature, personally. One line I wanted to suggest, since we have ways of searching for swamps and plains specifically. Sunlit Marsh, the new basic dual land. Yes, it comes onto the battlefield tapped. There's no way to bring this into play untapped. Not unless you're using other artifacts, for example. But still, if you don't need your land right away, and it looks like we're not afraid to play tapped lands, why not run the Sunlit Marsh? And those are my suggestions for how I would spice this deck up my way. But F.B.I, you've got a spicy list here. Thank you for sharing it with us today. Good to have you back on the channel, and hopefully we get a game again soon. It's been a bit. So, on that note, for those who want to see the rest of the content on the channel, that's right up here. I've also got a couple of other videos here. I'm going to put Regna and Krav as one of them. It's an older video, but it's still one of my favorite in-paper builds. And on that, we will see you all again for the next EDH Community Theater. Bye for now.